My name is Rachel. And if you had asked me 5 years ago what I wanted out of life, I would have answered with 2 words. More and better. I wasn't unhappy, not really. But I was restless. Always comparing. Always reaching. I had a husband, Daniel, who loved me deeply, and I left him. Not because he hurt me. Not because he failed me. But because I convinced myself he wasn't enough. Daniel and I met in college. He was studying mechanical engineering while I floated between majors, convinced I was meant for something grand. Something bigger. He was quiet, dependable, thoughtful to the point of being predictable. I used to joke that he was like a human seatbelt, always there, always keeping me safe but never exciting. After we got married, I started to see the cracks, not in him but in me. He'd come home from work, wrap his arms around me, ask about my day. He never forgot birthdays, never missed dinners, never raised his voice. But I wanted fireworks. Surprises. Passion like in the movies. Instead I got routine. Or at least that's what I told myself. Our apartment was small, but he worked extra hours just to afford it. On weekends he'd fix things, our broken coffee table, the squeaky drawer in the kitchen. I'd watch him, irritated by the grease on his hands, the worn-out jeans he refused to throw away. I started seeing his simplicity as smallness. And then came Caleb. He was the creative director at the ad agency where I worked. Bold, ambitious, flirtatious. He complimented my ideas in meetings, laughed at my sarcasm, told me I deserved a life full of excitement. I never cheated. Not physically. But I allowed his attention to become a mirror. I began seeing Daniel as less than, simply because Caleb saw me as more. It wasn't long before I filed for divorce. Daniel didn't fight. He just nodded, packed a single bag and left our apartment with nothing but his work laptop and a box of photos. I remember watching him walk out the door, waiting for him to turn around. He didn't. That was the last time I saw him for nearly 2 years. I moved into a studio in the city, threw myself into work, dated casually, laughed loudly, posed for pictures with cocktails and hashtags. But when the nights grew long and the faces changed, I started to feel something I hadn't expected. Hello, Caleb. He moved on 3 months after our first date. Said I was too serious once I started talking about commitment. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the door as he walked away, and for the first time I realized how loud silence could be. One random Tuesday I ran into Daniel's sister, Emily, at a grocery store on the east side. She smiled politely, but there was a flicker of judgment in her eyes. "How's Daniel?" I asked, pretending I didn't care. She raised a brow. "You mean you haven't seen the photos?" "Photos?" She pulled out her phone, flipped through, then turned it toward me. There he was. Daniel. Sun-kissed. Wearing a crisp white shirt I'd never seen before. Sitting on a rooftop restaurant patio, his arm around a woman I didn't recognize, brunette, glowing, gorgeous. They were toasting champagne. He looked happy. Not just smiling for the camera, happy, real happy. The kind I never saw in our years together. I laughed. A short, sharp sound that felt like splinters in my throat. "Good for him," I said flatly. Emily just nodded. "Yeah. He finally found someone who sees him." That line haunted me for weeks. Someone who sees him. Had I ever really looked? One night I couldn't sleep. So I opened my old email account, the one Daniel and I used to share our grocery lists, dinner plans, and weekend getaways. I typed in his name, not expecting anything. But what I found was an unsent draft. Subject line: "If you ever read this, Rachel." The cursor blinked at me like a warning. But I clicked it anyway. "I don't blame you for leaving. I know I wasn't shiny enough for you. I wanted to give you peace, not thrill. Safety, not fireworks. I thought that was love. But maybe you were right. Maybe I loved you wrong. Still, I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do." I stared at the screen for a long time, my fingers trembling over the keys. I never responded. I didn't know how. But that night I started watching him. His life. From afar. He had a new job. Senior engineer at a tech firm in Seattle. He hiked now, something I'd always refused to try. He had a dog. A golden retriever named Milo. And that woman? Her name was Claire. She ran a nonprofit for foster youth. They weren't married yet. But they looked like they'd been building something I used to dream about. And the truth I couldn't ignore? Daniel had grown. He'd become the man I always wanted, after I left him. And me? I was stuck, staring at filtered photos, swiping through meaningless dates, wondering if maybe, just maybe, I was the one who didn't deserve him. But what I saw next would shatter everything I thought I knew. Because Claire had a secret, and Daniel had no idea. I never meant to go to Seattle, but I did. 3 months after seeing that photo of Daniel and Claire, I was sent there for a 2-week training by my firm. I laughed at the coincidence when I saw the email from HR Life with its cruel humor, had delivered me to his city, a city he now called home. I told myself I wouldn't look for him, that I'd just do my job and get out. But we both know that was a lie. On my 3rd day in Seattle, I searched him online again. Not on social media, he wasn't active. But his company had a website. There was a professional headshot of him looking older, sharper, more confident. His bio was modest. Daniel Miller, lead systems engineer, outdoor enthusiast, proud dog dad. There was an upcoming conference listed on the same page. Daniel was scheduled as one of the speakers. And I registered. I used my work badge. No one knew. I told myself it was just curiosity. Nothing more. The conference was held in a hotel ballroom, and I sat near the back, heart pounding harder with every second. When he finally walked onto the stage, I forgot to breathe. He looked taller. Or maybe it was the posture. He no longer walked like someone carrying rejection on his back. His voice, steady and deep, filled the room as he spoke about clean design systems and future-forward thinking. People clapped. Someone whistled. And Daniel smiled, really smiled. It hit me in the chest like a punch. After the presentation, I followed him. I didn't speak to him. I didn't even get close. I just watched from across the hotel lobby as he laughed with colleagues, shook hands and kissed Claire, who had come to meet him with Milo on a leash. I had no right to be there, I knew that. But something in me still burned. Jealousy? Regret? Guilt? Maybe all three. That night I walked through Pike Place Market alone, eating a pastry I couldn't even taste. I sat on a bench facing the water, the cold breeze biting at my skin. I hadn't felt this hollow since the day he left. But what happened next? I never saw coming. The next morning, I walked into a small coffee shop near the conference center. It was one of those quiet, artsy places, wooden shelves, handwritten menus. As I waited in line, I overheard 2 women chatting by the window. "She hasn't told him yet," one said in a hushed tone. "She has to. It's been over a year." "I know. But she's scared. Daniel's different from the others. She doesn't want to lose this one." That name, Daniel, rang in my ears like a siren. I turned my head, pretending to read the pastry case, and glanced at them through the reflection. One of them looked familiar. I had seen her in a photo on Claire's Instagram. Her name was Vanessa, Claire's close friend. They weren't talking about just any Daniel. They were talking about my Daniel. And Claire hadn't told him something important. I followed them out of the shop. I know how it sounds. I'm not proud of it. But I had to know. I had to understand. I tailed them to a nearby bookstore, pretending to browse the same shelves. I caught snippets. Words like, "back when she was with Brian," "termination papers." "He still thinks it was just a break." My heart twisted. Claire had a past Daniel didn't know about. A messy, complicated one. And more importantly, she had lied about when their relationship started. It wasn't after Daniel and I divorced. It was before. I stumbled back into my hotel room, replaying every word, every expression. I wanted to scream. Not because he was with her, but because he had built a life with someone who had done to him what I never did, cheated. Suddenly, everything inside me flipped. The anger, the jealousy, the guilt. It all collided into something new. I had been the villain in our story. But what if she was too? What if Daniel didn't know that the life he thought he'd rebuilt was built on secrets? That night, I wrote him a letter. I didn't send it, but I poured every truth into it. About my regret. About how I never appreciated his kind heart. About what I'd overheard. It was 3 pages long. The next day, I tucked the envelope into my bag and made the decision. I was going to tell him everything. Not to win him back, but to give him the truth I never gave him before. I just didn't expect what I found when I knocked on his door. It wasn't Claire who opened it. It was a little boy. 4 years old, maybe 5. Blonde like Daniel. Big brown eyes. Holding a toy car in one hand. He looked up at me and said one word. Mommy. My blood turned to ice. Because I knew he wasn't mine. And yet, he was calling someone mommy. And Daniel's voice echoed down the hallway, calm and cheerful. Hey buddy, who's at the door? I turned and walked away before he could see me. But my mind was spiraling. A child. A secret past. A woman who wasn't who she claimed to be. Daniel had more than just a girlfriend. He had a life so different from what I'd imagined. And I was about to risk blowing it all open. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the edge of the hotel bed with the letter still sealed in my bag. The boy's face haunted me. He was about 5. That meant he would have been born not long after Daniel and I separated. Maybe even before the divorce was final. But Daniel never mentioned a child. Not in anything I'd seen. Not in the online articles, the conference bio, or the photos. There was no sign of a son. And Claire, her social media was filled with sunsets, hikes, and non-profit events. Not a single glimpse of that boy. I kept hearing his voice in my head, so innocent, so sure. Mommy. It tore through me. Was Daniel the father? Or was Claire hiding even more than I thought? The next morning, I made a decision I never thought I would. I called Emily. She didn't answer on the first ring. Or the second. But by the fourth, her voice came through, tight and cautious. Rachel. I hadn't spoken to her since the divorce. Please, I said, barely able to steady my voice. I just need 5 minutes. There was a pause. Then a sigh. Coffee shop on Madison.
10 o'clock.
Don't be late. I was there 15 minutes early. Emily walked in like a woman carrying armor, shoulders square, eyes sharp. She sat across from me, ordered nothing. I saw Daniel, I said. At the conference. Her expression didn't change. And I saw a child. That caught her off guard. Her lips parted, her brow lifted. I didn't mean to. It just happened. He opened the door. Called me mommy. She folded her arms. That wasn't your son, Rachel. I know. That's why I'm here. There was a long silence between us. People talked and laughed around us, the clatter of spoons and ceramic filling the background. I thought you left because Daniel wasn't enough, she finally said. I did, I admitted. And it was the worst mistake of my life. Emily's eyes softened just slightly, but then she leaned in. That boy's name is Evan. He's not Daniel's biological son. Claire had him from a previous relationship. She told Daniel she was raising him alone after Evan's father left them. I nodded slowly. She said she started dating Daniel after you divorced. That she was honest from the beginning. But, Emily hesitated. A few months ago, I overheard something that didn't sit right. What? She slipped. She mentioned a date they'd gone on when you and Daniel were still married. I confronted her, but she backtracked fast. Said she got the timeline confused. My heart dropped. So it was true. Claire had started seeing Daniel before our marriage ended. He just didn't know it. I was going to tell him, Emily said. But he's happy. Or at least he thinks he is. He calls Evan his son. They're inseparable. And Claire? She's been talking about wedding plans. I blinked hard. They're getting married? In 3 weeks. A small ceremony in the mountains. The words hit like gravel in my throat. I thought I had come to give Daniel the truth. To free him from a lie. But what would that truth do now? Break apart a family? Shatter the life of an innocent child? Still, could I live with knowing and doing nothing? Emily touched my hand. If you want to tell him, you should. But be sure you're not doing it out of jealousy. Make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. I nodded, holding back tears. That night, I walked to the lake by my hotel. The water was still. A reflection of everything. I wasn't calm, steady, undisturbed. I pulled out the letter. Reread it. And added a 4th page. This time I wrote about Evan. About the truth Claire never told. About how love can only survive when it's built on honesty. Then I slid the pages into a new envelope. The next morning, I drove to Daniel's office building. I waited outside, heart racing, palms sweating. When he came out, he looked exactly the same and completely different. Daniel hadn't seen me yet. He was holding his phone, laughing at something. That same warm Daniel laugh. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, Tie loose energy calm. The man I once loved. The man I never really saw. I stepped in front of him. He stopped mid-laugh, eyes going wide. Rachel. Hi, I said, voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk? His smile faded. Not in anger, just surprise. Hesitation. Okay. We sat on a bench nearby. I handed him the envelope. I'm not here to ruin your life, I said quickly. I'm not asking for anything. I overheard something. And I think you deserve to know. Daniel stared at the envelope like it was a grenade. Claire wasn't honest with you. Not about everything. He looked at me now. His eyes sharp, wary, but still kind. You're telling me this now? He asked. I didn't plan to, but I couldn't ignore it. I know what I lost, Daniel. And I'm not trying to undo your happiness. But I couldn't leave without giving you the truth. Something I never did before. He nodded slowly, quietly, then looked out over the parking lot, the trees just starting to bloom with spring. And then he said something that made my breath catch. I always wondered, he said, if you ever regretted leaving. I swallowed hard. Every day. Daniel didn't say anything else. Just held the envelope in his lap like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I'm sorry, I said. He looked at me. Not with anger. Not even with pain. But with something deeper. Disappointment. And maybe sadness for what we once were. I don't know what I'm going to do with this, he said. But thank you for telling me. I nodded. You deserve a life that's real. With someone who doesn't lie. And if she is that person, then you'll know for sure now. He stood up. So did I. And for a long second we just stood there. The wind brushed between us, carrying with it years of memories I wished I could rewrite. Then he turned and walked away. Envelope still in his hand. I didn't know what he'd do next. But I knew one thing. The truth was finally his. And whatever came after would be real. But what I didn't know then was that Daniel's response to that letter would change everything. 3 days passed before I heard anything. I had returned to my city, to my cramped apartment that now felt more like a prison cell than a home. My heart had been thumping a slow, uncertain beat since the moment I handed Daniel that letter. I didn't expect him to call. I didn't expect anything, really. But on the third morning I woke up to a single email. From Daniel Miller. Subject. I read it. There was no greeting. No sign-off. Just 3 sentences. I read your letter. I've asked Claire to tell me the truth. I'm not sure where this leaves any of us yet, but thank you for being honest. I stared at the screen for a long time, rereading it like it might somehow rearrange itself into something hopeful. I didn't reply, because nothing I could say would make what followed easier for him or for me. A week passed. Then 2. I tried to go back to work, to routines, to the kind of life where emails and deadlines replace pain and uncertainty. But I kept checking his social media, even though I knew he barely used it. I searched for photos of Claire, of Evan, of anything that might tell me if he was okay. Then one evening as I was leaving the office my phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice was tight, hushed. He moved out, she said. What? Daniel. He packed a bag and left Claire's place 2 nights ago. Took Evan with him. Said he needed time. That he couldn't look at her until she admitted everything. My heart twisted. What about the wedding? Postponed indefinitely. I didn't know what to say. I felt empty. Not joyful. Not vindicated. Just empty. She lied, Rachel. Emily continued. Worse than you thought. She didn't just start seeing Daniel before the divorce. She was still seeing her ex too. The child, Evan, was never confirmed as his, but she led Daniel to believe she'd been abandoned. The truth? She left the child's father after he caught her cheating. Same pattern. I sank onto the edge of my bed, my hands trembling. He's crushed, she said. But he's also free now. He sees that. Daniel didn't call me. Not then. Not for another month. But I saw a photo pop up online. Him and Evan. At a lakeside park. Daniel's face wasn't the carefree grin I'd seen in Seattle, but it was peaceful. Reflective. Like he was finally letting himself process the last few years. I wondered if he hated me less now. If he understood even a little that I had changed. Then one rainy Friday afternoon my doorbell rang. And there he was. Daniel. Standing outside my building, holding a red umbrella. He looked different again. Not polished. Not wounded. Just real. I buzzed him in. We sat across from each other in the tiny living room, the silence heavy. He didn't waste time. Claire told me everything, he said. I nodded slowly. She said she loved me, that she was scared to lose me. That's why she lied. And Evan? I asked. She begged me not to leave, said Evan sees me as his father. And the truth is, I see him as my son. There was pain in his eyes, but also clarity. I'm not going back to her, he said. Not because of you. Not because of this mess. But because I can't build a future with someone who lied every day for years. He looked around my apartment. Then his eyes settled on me. I used to think I wasn't good enough for you. My throat tightened. You never said it. But I saw it in your eyes, Rachel. Every time I brought you tea, every time I wore the same old jeans. You looked past me. Like I was a placeholder. Tears blurred my vision. I was wrong, I whispered. About everything. I know, he said. I thought I wanted more, I continued. But I didn't even understand what more meant. You gave me love that didn't shout. Kindness that didn't show off. I threw it away, because I thought noise was better than peace. Daniel looked down at his hands, then back up at me. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. Every day. There was another pause. A breath caught in time. I forgive you, he said. Just like that. Simple. Quiet. Sincere. It broke me. I sobbed. Not the kind of cry you do in a movie with one perfect tear. This was messy. Raw. Years of guilt flooding out of me like a dam finally breaking. He let me cry. And when I calmed down, he spoke again. But I'm not the same man anymore, he said. I've changed. I had to. And I'm still figuring out who that man is. I need time. I need space. But I don't hate you, Rachel. I never could. I nodded. I understand. He stood up, walked to the door, then paused. I don't know where life will take me next, he said. But I know I want it to be honest, real, and peaceful. I gave him a sad smile. You always did. And then he left. But not like before. Not like the day he walked out of our marriage. This time he didn't carry the weight of my disappointment. This time he walked with purpose. And I was left with silence again. But this silence felt different. This silence felt like a second chance. Even if it never came. Because I had finally become the kind of woman who could love a man like Daniel. Even if he never loved me again. But just when I thought our story had found its ending, something happened that changed everything. 2 months passed. Daniel hadn't reached out again. I didn't expect him to. After all, what more could be said? He was rebuilding his life. And I was learning how to live with my mistakes. I started seeing a therapist. The first time I admitted, out loud, that I left a good man because I was chasing an illusion, it broke something in me. But breaking was necessary. I'd built a life out of denial, excuses, and pride. There was no room left for truth until I burned the lies down. Work became a routine again. I joined a community cooking class, tried hiking once, and started writing letters I never sent. Some were to Daniel. Others were to Evan. Some were to the version of myself I had once been, selfish, impatient, blind. Seattle faded into memory. But Daniel didn't. Then one evening, as the summer heat softened into dusk, I got a call. Emily. Rachel, something happened. I sat up straight, immediately tense. What is it? Is he okay? She hesitated. It's about Evan. I froze. He got sick, she said softly. High fever. Seizure. They rushed him to the hospital 2 nights ago. Daniel's been there every hour since. He's barely slept. I felt the air leave my lungs. Is he going to be okay? I asked. They don't know yet. The doctors are running tests. It might be meningitis. Oh my God, I whispered. And Rachel. Claire hasn't been there. What? She came by once. Said she couldn't handle hospitals. She left after 20 minutes. Daniel hasn't said a word about it, but you can see it's killing him. He's doing this alone. I didn't think. I just moved. I packed a bag. Caught the first flight out the next morning. I didn't call ahead. I didn't warn him. I just needed to be there, even if I stood outside those hospital walls. By noon I was in Seattle again. The pediatric wing smelled like antiseptic and fear. I walked through the corridor slowly, eyes scanning until I saw him. Daniel, slumped in a chair outside a hospital room. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair disheveled. He was holding a stuffed bear in one hand and resting his head against the wall, eyes closed. I approached gently. He sensed me before he saw me. His eyes flicked open and widened. Rachel? I knelt beside him. I'm sorry. I heard about Evan. Emily told me. I came to see if you needed anything. He stared at me for a long moment. And then without warning he broke. Tears spilled over his cheeks. Silent. Desperate. Years of strength unraveling in seconds. I had never seen him cry like that, not even when I left. I don't know if he's going to make it, he whispered. He's so small, and he looks at me like I'm his whole world. And I don't know if I'm enough. I reached for his hand. You are, I said, voice shaking. You always were. He gripped my hand tightly like he was afraid to let go. We sat in silence for what felt like forever. Then a nurse came out and spoke gently. He's resting now. No changes yet. Daniel stood but wavered. You need food, I said. You need to shower. Let me help. He didn't argue. He let me take him to the cafeteria. I got him soup he didn't touch. He stared at it like it was foreign. Then I helped him find a vending machine and a couch in the parent lounge. He closed his eyes just for 10 minutes and I sat beside him the whole time. That night I stayed in the hospital with him. He asked me why. Because love doesn't disappear, I said. Even when it's broken. Even when it's not mine anymore. The next day Evan's fever broke. The doctors said it was a turning point. And when Evan woke up, the first word he said was, Daddy. Daniel wept all over again. And I held his shoulders while he did. 3 days later, Evan was moved to recovery. Daniel stood at the window watching him sleep. I thought you were gone for good, he said quietly. I was, I answered. But some things, some people, we never really leave. He turned to me, his eyes heavy with meaning. I never wanted to fall for Claire. I wanted to forget you. I thought building something new would erase the pain. But all it did was bury it. I stepped closer. And now? I don't know, he said. I don't know what we are. But I know this. You were the only person who showed up when it mattered most. A beat passed. Then another. I'm not asking you to come back, I said gently. I just want you to know that I see you now. Truly. And if there's ever a path forward, I'll walk it. Slowly. Patiently. Or not at all. As long as it's honest. Daniel didn't speak. He just nodded. And when I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. Don't go yet. I stayed. Not because everything had been fixed, but because something new had been planted. And for the first time in years, Daniel and I were finally standing in the same place. But the true reckoning, the final moment of truth, was still coming. And none of us were ready for what it would reveal. 3 weeks passed. Evan's recovery was steady. Every day he grew stronger, color returning to his cheeks, his laughter ringing softly through the hospital halls, his grip on Daniel's hand growing tighter. And through it all, I was there. I brought books and snacks, helped Daniel with paperwork, sat with Evan when Daniel needed to sleep, or simply breathe. We became a rhythm again. Not husband and wife, not lovers, but something quieter, more fragile. Claire never returned. Not even after the doctors gave Evan the all-clear. Daniel told me one night while Evan slept that she had left town. She called once, he said, his voice hollow. Said she needed to figure herself out. Said she knew I'd take better care of him anyway. He didn't cry when he told me. He didn't rage. He just accepted it. She used to say Evan wasn't mine, he continued. But he is. In every way that matters. We sat together in silence, that kind of silence that only comes after grief, regret, and unspoken healing. I think I'm afraid to start over, he said after a while. I think I am too, I whispered. He looked at me then, really looked. I'm afraid that if I forgive you fully, I'll lose myself again. My heart ached. Then don't. Don't forget what she taught you. What I taught you. Keep the walls that protect you, Daniel. Just maybe leave room for a window. He smiled. A slow, sad smile. Always with the metaphors. Learn from the best, I whispered. He reached for my hand. Not like before, not with passion or desperation, but with something far deeper. A quiet willingness. Weeks turned into months. Evan went home, this time to Daniel's new apartment. Smaller, humble, but filled with light. He invited me over for dinner one evening. I helped Evan with his math homework. We watched a nature documentary. We ate spaghetti on mismatched plates. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't more. But it was the first time in years I felt something close to joy. Eventually, Daniel and I started walking together. Every Sunday. Through the park. Down quiet streets. We talked about life, about work, about Evan's obsession with dinosaurs. Sometimes we talked about the past. Sometimes we didn't. One day we stopped by the lake. The same lake where I once handed him the truth folded in an envelope. He turned to me and said, "Do you ever wish you could go back?" "Every day," I replied. "I don't," he said. I froze. But he continued, "If I hadn't gone through everything, I wouldn't be this version of me. The version that's stronger, wiser, a better father." He paused, then added softly, "A better man." I nodded, my throat thick. "I'm proud of you," I said. And then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small photo, folded at the edges. One I hadn't seen in years. It was the two of us. Younger. On our wedding day. Him in that wrinkled gray suit. Me in a borrowed dress. Both of us laughing, covered in cake. "I never threw this away," he said. "Even after everything." Tears blurred my vision. "I didn't keep it because I couldn't let go," he continued. "I kept it because I chose to forgive." My knees buckled with emotion. "You don't have to say this." He held up a hand. "I'm not offering to start over," he said. "Not the way we were. That version of us? It's gone. But maybe we built something new. From the ground up. With open eyes. With truth. And no illusions," I added. He smiled.
No illusions.
We walked home that evening in silence. Not the awkward kind. The peaceful kind. The kind that only comes when two people have walked through fire. And made it to the other side. Months passed. And one fall morning, Evan ran ahead of us on the trail, leaves crunching beneath his feet, his laughter filling the crisp air. Daniel looked at me. I looked back. There were no grand gestures.
No declarations.
Just two people walking toward a life that was honest, slow, and real. And it was more than enough. Because redemption doesn't always come wrapped in roses or second weddings. Sometimes it looks like spaghetti and Sunday walks and dinosaur drawings on the fridge. Sometimes redemption is a man who forgives. And a woman who finally learns to love, without running away.